Hey, so today we're going to be talking about anger. Anger is one of those hot topic buttons, especially for people in the black community because it's been an emotion that's been highly stigmatized, whether it's been how we engage with it ourselves within our own lives or how we engage with it professionally or even within relationships. So today we're going to go over how anger is an important component of a healthy relationship And I think that this can be counterintuitive to a lot of people, where many times we view anger as a threat to relationships. And many times that's because that's how we've experienced it. But as I dive into this, what I want to kind of outline for us is a little bit of the history behind how a lot of us became conditioned around this emotion of anger, some historical aspects, and also some cultural dynamics that may have taken place within people's families and such. The first thing that I want to start off with saying is how anger has been made unsafe in many relationships, especially within the black community. And a lot of these cultural dynamics that we've experienced have roots within our history, within the experience of slavery. That was it was a horrific experience. And for those of you familiar with Dr. Joy DeGrew's post-traumatic slave syndrome, you have at least a framework of the impact of dealing with terrorizing, with trauma, unsafety, a lack of agency, access, control that spans from generation to generation to generation. That it has a tremendous effect on all of our lives and how we engage in it. Well, when it comes to anger, this was something that was primary within that experience that was attempted to be controlled, quelled, and to a degree destroyed, unless it was used for some level of gain, right? Where if you're, let's say, if you're fighting individuals, we all see the movie Django, right? If they were fighting slaves, okay, anger is fine then, but it wasn't fine at any other point. And this is something that was really significant because you have to understand the trauma that was constantly at play, whether it was a family member being sold or harmed or killed. Um, you were constantly dealing with sorrow. You were constantly dealing with injustice. You were constantly dealing with your humanity being diminished or destroyed. And anger is a natural emotion that points to what we are experiencing within our lives and inside. The fact that it was not safe for us to be able to engage with this emotion for hundreds of years had a significant deterioration within our humanity in terms of how we express ourselves. One of the things that happened is that, one, we look to quell anger within each of us. So, in other words, we began to project that sense of a lack of safety onto one another. We began to encourage young men and women when something would happen and you could see that anger rising up. We would begin to quickly jump on them and say, hey, chill out, relax, calm down. I know, I understand. But that's not the way to respond to it. And what we began to do is to squelch or to diminish one's ability to really be in touch with the impact of what they're experiencing in their lives are or were. The effect that this had is an isolating effect, an effect that begins to disconnect you, not just from yourself, if you were to actually adopt it, if you were to actually concede and uh, and stop trying to express that anger, but it also had a disconnecting effect between you and your community. When others began to tell you not to be angry, what it began to do is show that there really wasn't an understanding of just how significant this experience was for you. Because the reality is there was much to be angry about. Now, let me be clear. Throughout this experience, there were plenty of angry as hell African people, indigenous people who were being oppressed, who were like, nah, forget that. I'm angry. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do something about it. And that's a part of the legacy of our culture as well. However, it did become normalized that the suppression of anger was actually a means of survival. It was a means of safety. And it was an aspect of our community that many times was imposed and projected upon many of us, especially when we were younger. It was to prevent us from doing something rash, quickly, that could get us killed, maimed, beaten, sold, right? And so to prevent more harm, we attempted to help control others' anger, and that had a detrimental effect. The other component of it is we began to internalize that. We began to internalize this idea that we should not be angry. And what this did was it disconnected us from ourselves. Because once again, there are many things that should upset us, right? Not having access to housing, not having access to healthcare, not having access to food, not having the ability to navigate one's own environment to be able to actualize themselves and to bring about what they see needed in their community and for their families. All these things should anger us, right? Injustice around the world, and yet, for a lot of us, we still don't feel safe to express ourselves. Many times this was internalized in our own childhoods, where we were not allowed to express ourselves in our anger to parents, to loved ones, in school, to teachers, amongst peers, at work. The constant projections of what that meant to be an angry black man or an angry black woman, an angry individual. You have these associations with a lack of self-control. You have these associations with a lack of maturity, a lack of professionalism, right? Undesirable, out of control, dangerous, scary. And all these things force us into this dynamic where to engage with a part of ourselves is to also accept rejection from our community. And that is extremely detrimental for human beings because we're naturally communal. We naturally desire to be in relationship. We naturally desire to be seen and accepted. And so creating this type of dynamic with a considerable part of our experience and who we are as human beings in terms of engaging with our emotions, especially anger, created a really perilous relational dynamic where I can show who I am, but I can only show parts of who I am. There's only so much that you can hold. There's only so much that's wanted or accepted. The next part that I want to kind of go over is that those experiences, those projections, those prejudices and stereotypes around being someone of color and being angry, it doesn't skip being inside of the black home. It doesn't skip being inside of black relationships. You see, many times we think that, if we find someone within our community, within our culture, they'll understand. And many times they do. And we still all have the conditioning that we've had. We still all hold the experience of a lifetime of being told what anger is for us and how it's to be expressed and how it's not to be expressed. And so many times we will actually unconsciously project that onto our partners. We'll unconsciously communicate to them that it's not safe for them to be upset. And many times within our own experience, we're looking on the outside and we're quickly assessing if something is worthy of being upset, and we will project that onto the other person, not realizing that we are actually diminishing, we're actually minimizing their experience. We're actually cutting ourselves off from relationship and understanding of who they are and what they're going through. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we can potentially change that dynamic later on, right? That's going to actually be part 2 of this video. The next part I want to go into is, why is anger important to relationships? And I think that this is the crux of this video. We kind of have a bit of the historical, but now this is where we get to kind of the meat and bones of this. That anger is actually really important in relationships. It actually plays a vital part in our relationships. I first want to start off with just a simple definition of what is anger. Anger is a natural emotional response to perceived threats, harm, or injustice. It is often triggered by feelings of frustration, fear, hurt, or a sense of being wronged. You see, many times anger is something that we don't recognize its role and what it does for us as human beings, what it allows us to capture, to connect with, to become aware of. And as a result, we end up not being able to meet our basic needs, our basic human desires and needs for connection, safety, feeling seen, having our needs met, because we have a relationship with ourselves that says we're not allowed to access certain parts of us. The second part of this is anger is a powerful emotion that grabs our attention and brings us into deep and present connection with ourselves to inform us of our experience. Look, it is important because it allows us to make necessary shifts within ourselves and our relationship to ensure it is responsive to what we are needing at a core and fundamental level. At a core and fundamental level. Without anger, harms continue. Isolation ensues. Cracks in relationship become caverns, and the normalization of self-neglect through suppression of anger creates feelings of unworthiness and being unseen. I wanted to make sure that I was intentional with these words because they are truly, truly apparent in many relationships. How our inability to connect with our own anger limits our ability to connect with our partner. Our inability to connect with our own anger can directly impact our ability to connect with our partner. And that is one of the primary reasons why anger is an important component of a healthy relationship. See, many of us skip steps. We go straight to trying to control our anger, and we don't actually have a connection and healthy relationship to it. You can't control something that you don't understand. You can't control something that you don't have the ability to navigate. How do you control a car? Well, you get lessons. You learn how to drive. You practice. You read a manual. How do you learn how to do anything? Same kind of process. You learn, you practice, and you develop skill and understanding. For a lot of us, we have had the relationship with anger like most of us have had a relationship with fire or a hot stove. We reached for it and then our hand got slapped. Said, watch out, it's hot. Or we reached for it and we got burned. Or we saw someone else reach for it and they got burned. Or sometimes we got burned. And so it began to create this type of knee-jerk reaction to this emotion. What is important to realize, however, is that anger is a secondary emotion. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't always realize, that anger is not a primary emotion. Anger actually acts as either a shield or a sword to protect more vulnerable emotions. The reason why this is important to understand is because a lot of us, we stop at anger. We stop at I feel angry. And we try to communicate it and work through it at that level. But the reality is it's only pointing you to something deeper taking place. It's only helping you to realize that there's something beneath the surface that needs to be addressed. And we all have an opportunity to get to that level. But we have to be brave enough to actually embrace a part of ourselves that we've been taught and conditioned to reject in the first place, which can be a harrowing experience. Some of the emotions that anger protects: fear, ineptitude, the inability to do something, feeling uncared for, feeling unloved, invalidated, insecure, lonely, rejected, uncertainty, sadness. I'm bringing up these emotions and providing some adjectives to them because for a lot of us, we have not been trained to be emotionally intelligent. We have not been trained or taught to be emotionally aware or attuned. And as a result, we have a very, I'm not going to say primal, but a very infantile type relationship to our emotions. We either feel it and go, is this one that I can go with? Like laughter? Sure, go, laugh. Okay, cool. Am I actually connecting inside of me why I feel a sense of joy or connection or what's valuable about this experience? Most of the time, no. But then we also have emotions that when we feel it, like sadness, especially for men, or insecurity, uncertainty, feeling unloved, alone, those emotions we are just as highly trained to never accept that we should feel, because to feel that would mean that we're less. And so we disconnect with these other emotions that are beneath the anger. And so we never actually get to what we're actually needing support with. Many times when we're trying to communicate in a relationship, we end up just talking about how angry we were, how something made us angry and made us really upset. A part of our journey when it comes to managing anger is to understand the feeling in the first place, and then be brave enough to go beneath the surface, to ask ourselves, what is going on underneath? If you haven't done so before, I would encourage you to look up a feelings chart or a feelings wheel. It's a wheel that on the inside of it has primary emotions: sad, angry, happy, right, tired. And then on the outside, the next layer of it, it has a little bit more complex emotions. And then on the furthest outer ring, it has even more complex emotions. This is to give us vocabulary. This is to give us an opportunity to learn how to articulate what we're experiencing. Because if we can't articulate it to ourselves, how can we articulate it to our partner, to our children, to our family, coworker? Something was done at work that made us feel angry. It's important that we can get to the point that we can talk to someone and say, hey, actually, I felt unacknowledged when I shared something that I was really desiring to share. I felt shut down. I felt unheard. I felt unsupported. So what I'm needing, and this is what we're going to get to in part 2 of this video. Part 2, we're going to do a separate video. What to do with the anger, what to do with these emotions. But you can't get to that if you first can't acknowledge what you're feeling. Now, here's the thing. What has really impacted a lot of us are the judgments that come with these emotions. We talked about it before, that for a lot of us, these emotions come with connotations that tell us that we are unprofessional, unworthy, not strong, we're not able to manage ourselves, to be in control, right? And these are aspects of our society that, people are lauded around for having control and being able to hold things, having the power over it. Well, unfortunately, there's also other judgments that come with these other emotions as well. And the sad part is, many times we will sacrifice ourselves, what's actually going on inside, so that we will have the appearance of how we believe we're being told we need to show up. And it is a really sad, have you ever seen someone, I don't know if you have, it's almost like seeing a kid who really wants to play with the other kids, but doesn't think that they'll be chosen, so they stand on the outside because they don't want to feel rejected. And they'd rather do the rejecting than to feel the rejection. And they're so scared of the rejection that they will willingly isolate themselves despite how badly they want to play with the other kids. That is a horrible experience that many of us are going through daily, that we want connection. We want to feel seen. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel a part of a relationship, a community. We want to feel like people desire to have us around them. And yet, our fear of how they will receive us in our vulnerability and our honesty actually prevents us from opening up, connecting with ourselves, let alone connecting with them. But some other aspects, we don't just reject. Suppression of anger leads to the following many times: outbursts. This is where we talk about people who stuff things down and then they explode out on others. Passive aggression. It's where you either seek revenge or ways in which to retaliate for what you are feeling. Self-isolation, we talked about that a moment ago. Stonewalling, where one intentionally refuses to engage despite people's prompting. Feeling alone, feeling abandoned, uncared for, unsupported, unloved, and potentially symptoms of depression and or anxiety. These are all byproducts of suppressing, stuffing anger. See, many times there is more space for us within our relationships than we have the tools to create. Sometimes we assume that people can't hold our emotions. We assume that people don't want to see us show up in our vulnerability, that people can't handle it. But many times we haven't developed the tools either within ourselves or even our partner hasn't developed it within themselves for us to create a relationship where we can show up vulnerably. And that is one of the saddest things you can see is two people who genuinely care for each other, love each other, but don't believe that there's space between them to actually show up authentically, to have their true self be accepted. And that's what a lot of us are carrying every day, walking around in relationships feeling alone. Now, I don't want to diminish any of the experiences that people have had, and I want to own this. I think this has to be acknowledged that many of us have grown up in homes seeing models of unsafe anger expressed within parental relationships, whether they were married or not. Sometimes we witnessed it take place within our schools, with teachers, a boss, someone in our family, community, siblings, where anger was not engaged with in a safe way, where people who became angry became dangerous, literally. They became violent, either physically, emotionally, relationally, verbally. And so we began to internalize that this emotion itself was not safe. We created an untrue connotation. See, it wasn't the emotion, it was someone's navigation of it. But as a child, it's hard to understand that. And if you don't have someone guiding you through it, it is very easy for you to create that type of connection and to go with that. But here's the thing. The sad part is that, at least in childhood, within the ignorance of dealing with anger, we still have the ability to express it because we don't know not to yet. We don't know all the various ways in which we're not supposed to. And so we still lash out, we still yell, we still cry, we still complain, we still pout and shout and throw a temper tantrum. These are all ways in which the body is trying to figure out how to express itself. As we get older, however, and we become more and more cut off from these natural ways of attempting to learn how to manage or express what we're feeling inside, we actually find less and less ways to do so because we're told no far more than we're taught how. And this is another byproduct of what we experience. Unfortunately, as a result, for a lot of us as adults, as parents, people in relationships or single, at work, we find ourselves completely cut off from our ability to access our reality, our internal reality. And what this can do many times is it causes us to even place ourselves in unsafe environments. We don't know how to navigate what is a safe space to communicate our anger. We don't know what a safe relationship looks like that can hold our emotions. We don't know what safe workspaces or classrooms or how to even begin a conversation or open up with someone to share that vulnerability because we don't have the tools. Because we don't have the freedom up here. We do not believe we have the freedom to engage with who we are in here. We unconsciously and consciously, many times, and this is in relationships, where we assume blame and judgment for the feelings that we are struggling with both in ourselves and our partners. How many times have we heard or said, they or I should have known better than to trust you, than to think you would do different, fill it in. Or said, didn't they notice? Our projected expectation that the other person sees the world through our eyes and therefore understands our behavior, what's taking place around us in the same way. And so they should have known. Didn't they notice? If they cared, they would have, right? We've heard that one a lot. Probably used it a couple times. How many times have I asked them, believing that because we said it once, it should be memorized, forgetting just how much we all carry in our day-to-day lives and things that we're thinking about and feeling and experiencing, our own stuff that we're carrying around, and assume the other person was supposed to have it memorized. We don't think this consciously, but we project it. How many times have I asked them? Why do I even try? This internalized judgment that says there's something wrong with me for even trying again to communicate, to show up and be vulnerable, to have a conversation, because it didn't work the last time or the previous time. So why do I keep trying? These are ways in which we internalize judgment. Using terms like they always or they never. These are all common ways in which we have projected or internalized these judgments around dealing with emotions. Something to keep note of, and I want to end it on this. Our ability to acknowledge and process our emotions directly impact our ability to communicate them to our partners and work through them. But here's the catch. Here's the caveat, and we're going to end on this. We, not our partners, are responsible for understanding what we are experiencing and needing. If you can't process it and understand it and have the skills to communicate it, it is not your partner's responsibility to know it, to understand it, and meet your need. And that's a hard one for a lot of us to hold, that we're responsible for teaching our partner about us. We're responsible for showing up, being vulnerable, communicating, and letting them know how to support us, how to connect to us, how to be the partner that we're needing. We can't assume. Each of us have had our own lived experience, our own home experience. There's no judgments. There's no home that should have been this way, needed to be this way. All that stuff, it doesn't matter. You're in a relationship. For healthy relationships to develop, anger must be present. And it starts with us connecting to it. I'm going to jump into the second video after this. I hope you guys stay tuned to it. If you enjoyed the video, smash the like button, hit subscribe, the bell for notification for new videos posting, especially the part 2. And definitely leave some comments. I try to definitely make sure that I respond to them. I'm looking forward to talking with y'all later. Peace.